This is the February 21st meeting of the City of Ann Arbor Planning Commission. Commission public meetings are held the first and third Tuesday of each month, except this month because Monday was a holiday. Both of these meetings provide opportunities for the public to address the commission. All persons are encouraged to participate in public meetings. Citizens requiring translation or sign language services or other reasonable accommodations should contact the city clerk's office. Requests need to be received at least 2 business days in advance of the meeting. Planning Commission meeting agendas and packets are available from the Legislative Information Center on the city clerk's page of the city's website or on the first floor of City Hall on the Friday before the meeting. Agendas and packets are also sent to subscribers of the city's email notification system, GovDelivery. You can subscribe to this free service by accessing the city's website and clicking on the Subscribe to Updates envelope on the homepage. First, we'll have a call to order, and then, which I guess I did, and then the roll call.
That's me. Commissioner Ackerman.
Here.
Commissioner Briggs.
Here.
Commissioner Klein. Commissioner Gibb-Randall.
Here.
Commissioner Mills.
Here.
Commissioner Milstein. Commissioner Trudeau.
Here.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Here.
Commissioner Woods.
Here.
We have quorum.
Great. Item number 3 is approval of the agenda. Can I have a commissioner move the agenda? Moved by Commissioner Gibb-Randall, seconded by Commissioner Briggs. Are there any additions or corrections or discussion? Okay, all in favor of the agenda as published, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes, it's everybody. Next is introductions. Are there any? There are none. Next is the approval of minutes from the previous meeting. We have those in our packet from February 6th. Would a commissioner like to move the minutes? Commissioner Trudeau, seconded by Commissioner Weatherby. Sorry, it takes a minute to get last names. Any additions or corrections in the minutes? All in favor of approving the minutes as written, please say yes.
Yes.
That is everybody. Item number 6 is reports from city administration, city council, planning manager, planning commission officers and committees, written communications, and petitions. So we'll start with city council.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was a quiet night at City Council last night. We were in and out by 8:30 p.m., which is almost a land speed record. Of note in terms of land use, we approved the addition of a couple properties to the Greenbelt, which is always exciting news, leveraging partners' dollars with our county and township partners. In addition to that, accepting a grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to help fund further Greenbelt expansion into Northfield Township. Also of relevance to this body, the ground-mounted solar ordinance has finally been approved at second reading, but with the prohibition of ground-mounted solar in front yards.
Thank you very much. Planning manager.
Good evening. Not too much. I just wanted to update the commission on the city's I guess our ongoing evolution as it relates to medical marijuana facilities. We have a couple of our first applications that you'll be considering tonight, but largely with the fantastic management of Senior Planner Thatcher, we are currently in various states of review on about 23 medical marijuana provisioning centers throughout the city. So it's been a significant process. I think we did. There are some locational requirements. So the first weekend where we accepted petitions, we did have some folks camped outside of City Hall. But everything went really smoothly. Again, thanks to a lot of good work by Jill, I think we did a really good job communicating our expectations on applications and how that process would be managed. And now the work turns to you as the commission to consider all these proposals. So we're going to be, they're going to be coming to you we've got 2 this evening. We're going to have 1 we'll get to on public hearings for the March 6th meeting. And after that, we'll probably be sending them to you in larger quantities as you get a few under your belt. So just a quick note after the process has been an ongoing conversation over the last couple of months, but as we're reviewing through these proposals, again, if you're seeing information that would be helpful that you don't have, don't hesitate at the end of the meeting to just bring that up, and we can make sure that future petitions are providing that.
Thank you very much. Are there any planning commission officers or committees that need to report out? Okay. Next is written communications and petitions, and there were a couple online and more in your packet that I'll draw your attention to. And that is it for item number 6. So we're on item number 7, which is audience participation. Audience members may speak for 3 minutes about an item that is not listed as a public hearing on this agenda, and so those are the 2 items of under unfinished business, which were for provisioning centers, and the item for Huron Parkway landscape modification. If you're interested in speaking on any other item, you can approach the podium. Please state your name and address for the record. Anyone wishing to address us?
Do I need to sign in, or is that?
Once you're all done,
Great.
that's fine.
R. Jeffrey Benko, 213 West Madison Street. And I just wanted to received a postcard concerning the medical marijuana, this site being 500 feet from the 207 South Main, which I believe is going to be later on, or just starting. It was to receive, or to get that into the mix. Basically, trying to understand where you go once you receive one of those cards, I think is one thing that I would like to ask for better information put on the website. I was over your website quite a bit and was really impressed with the amount of information that's there. But that was basically everything for people that are applying for the process. And then for the public, how to respond. What is the response? I guess I was confused, where all this would fall. So if there would be a public hearing, which I believe would follow later on and such, but giving some understanding of when that would be occurring and the process that we have an opportunity to speak on that. Just in general with that, I've been trying to understand the process and, spoken to the person petitioning as well. One of the things that I'm kind of wondering about is, so we as a community have decided to allow these provisional sites. We have a community as well have decided that they should be, not within 1,000 feet of a school. And so I find it a little inconsistent that it could be within 500 feet of my house, which, my 3 boys live. So I realize I'm in a transitional area of the city where it really is an intermix, and there's a lot of zoning for, commercial, which really isn't used for commercial right now. There's people's houses there, and just how to have this in a mix. I can understand where these things are going. I would just think that they should be in a truly commercial lot, and especially on this lot where it's just immediately next door to a house. And so, in general, I'll be understanding that over the next weeks as this thing progresses. But again, I would appreciate some more information on how the public can proceed on this. And thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you will sign in now, that way we can just make sure we get your name in the record. Anyone else wish to address the commission at this time? Okay, we'll close that portion of audience participation. There is another opportunity at the end.
Sure. As a reminder, postcards for what we call minor projects are sent out to all property owners within 500 feet of a petition. In a case of a special exception use where no physical change is provided and it's less than 20,000 square feet. I forget the square footage dimension. It just requires notification of residents within 500 feet. For larger projects where a rezoning or a certain number of residential units or square footage is provided, it requires a citizen participation meeting. Certainly, for all special exception uses, they will be held considered via a public hearing at this body. For that, we will notify all property owners and residents within 300 feet of the proposed special exception use. We also publish it noticed on the website, and that's great feedback. I think one of the things we can do is try to provide a little bit more guidance to somebody when they receive a postcard in that situation. I think it's a little bit more intuitive when there's a citizen participation meeting, but it might be helpful to provide a little bit more guidance about when we're just doing it for notification.
As a follow-up question, can that be specified on the postcard as well?
It is. We require contact information for the petitioner, and we provide a template of language, but I guess based on this feedback, it might be time to revisit it and make sure that language is appropriate.
Thank you.
Yep, go ahead.
I was just wondering if it might be possible if we could just get a copy of the postcard so we can also be informed about what it has on there.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Woods. Maybe that's something that we can have for their next meeting. All right. Thank you very much for your comments. The next item is number 8, public hearings that are scheduled for the next business meeting, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Leonard.
Sure. We have two new public hearings. One will be for the proposed rezoning of 2301 Highland Road from public land to single-family residential for city council approval. You might recall some community conversation about this. This is the former Anglis house that the University of Michigan is selling. So this would be proposed rezoning to enable its use as a residential property. Then another second public hearing will be 2793 Plymouth Road for a medical marijuana provisioning center. As I think we've talked about the nature of those uses. And then we'll have a returning item on March 6th as well, which will be the cottages at Barton Green, a proposed development of an apartment community off of Pontiac Trail near the North Sky development.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we're on to unfinished business. We will, for each of these items, have a staff report, a public hearing, and then commission discussion. So I think we'll turn it over to Ms. Thatcher for the first item, which is the Tree City Health Collective Special Exception Use Permit and Site Plan for City Planning Commission approval.
Thank you. All the same information, the information you saw last month is in here, plus more. You'll notice that the motion got considerably longer. We've been talking a lot for the last month about what needs to be in here and why. And if you have questions about that, I'd be happy to get into any of them. Basically, it's ensuring that the motion includes, let me go to this. The motion includes the findings for the special exception use application, and also any conditions that we will be attaching to this particular special exception use petition. I think they're probably all going to have conditions, possibly going forward, some more than others. This one just has 2. So this is 321 East Liberty. The house was built in 1849. It is now used for commercial purposes, and it's on East Liberty Street. It's between South Fifth Avenue and South Division Street. Note the lack of snow in the front yard. Yeah?
I think the first petition is the Jackson site.
Oh, I'm sorry. My mistake. That. Now we're on Jackson Road. This one has 4 conditions, which I'll get to in a sec. All right, so 2730 Jackson Road, it's a plaza consisting of 2 buildings. Building A is the brick building that you'll see here on your right. Building B is a recently refurbished building, originally built as a laundromat. Now it has several different businesses in it. It's a 1.6 acre site. The gray building on the left is 5,600 square feet. The one that we're talking about tonight, though we're talking about the whole site, not specific to either building, but right now, the provisioning center business is located in an 8,100 square foot building on the right. That's Building A. Here's where we're located, Jackson Avenue, west of town. This is the eastbound 94 on-ramp that you turn onto. The site is sort of roughly triangular. It has fronts on these two long sides. It is zoned C2B. Has rather large setbacks because of it fronting on two roads. Here are the two buildings. I'll show you some better photos in a second, but it's a very clean site. It's been recently, had some work done on it, some cosmetic work on it. The parking has recently been repaved and the stripes painted on again. There was some information included, like this one, that's not looking very good on our screen, though, so I'm going to keep going. There was a site plan approved on this site in 1985 and administratively amended in 1986. It's been in continuous operation since then. Tree City is the business that we're talking about, the provisioning center. It's been in this site for 3 years. It was one of the original applicants when we went through medical marijuana in 2011. They were at a different site. They moved to this site 3 years ago. There is a floor plan in your packet with a little more information. It's this section of the building. This is marked as reserved for future expansion of provisioning center. Some photos walking around the site. This is the far west, the far left side of the building. This whole site used to be the Michigan Inn before it was raised several years ago. It will be redeveloped someday as something. Don't know what, don't know when, but likely a hotel use. The lot line is very close to the building on this side. I'm not even sure it goes as far as the edge of the grass here. This is the east end of the building. This is the brick building. It has a sidewalk out front, and it has a little connector here to get you to the front door. This is the area where bike parking is proposed to be added. There's no bicycle parking on the site right now. Once you're out there, here's the parking lot. It has pretty good interior circulation. It has interior sidewalks. This is probably 25 feet off of Jackson, off of the other sidewalk that we just saw. This is the building. Here's the section of the building that we're talking about. It has barrier-free parking, very easy to get around. There's just a single curb cut out onto Jackson. We do need to talk a little bit about landscaping. This is just to show the row of crabapple trees that you'll see on the landscape plan that I'll go back to in a second on the site plan. But most of the trees that are shown on the site plan are not there now. So one of the conditions is to put back trees, especially about 10 or 12 that are missing between that front interior walkway and the road right-of-way. It's a lovely mowed space right now, but it just needs those trees put back so that the site plan is in conformance with what was approved previously by City Council. As nice as these sidewalks along Jackson are, they're tough because this one stops here going west and this one stops here going east. So you can't get anywhere on those sidewalks. Hopefully someday that'll change. There is a sidewalk on the other side of Jackson, but you'll see that there's this barrier here. So it's hard to even get across the street until you're beyond Bethlehem Cemetery, which is directly across the street. There aren't any bike paths here either. So not very good bike or pedestrian connectivity here. So here's the swath that I'll show you in a sec on the site plan shows more trees. There are two down here. There's a pine and this may be an ash. But if you look on here, there's two pines here. There's two deciduous trees here, some pines, tree, 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 pine, pine. And another tree back here. Most of these trees on the island are here, and the crab apples are here. Not sure how many of those pines are left on the back. I think not many. So some of these species that were specified on this site plan, I have an inkling will not pass muster with our current list of approved trees. So this is one where I will take it back to Carrie Gray and ask her if she has, if those species are okay, or if she'd prefer a different species to be planted here. Roughly the same locations they would have to go back into. And like I said, that is one of the conditions of the motion. Specific to the zoning ordinance and the special exception use standards, the site is more than 1,000 feet from a school. It is more than 600 feet from any other provisioning centers that are going through this process right now. They've provided all of the information that's required about operations, safety and security plan, methods to contain odors, waste disposal, and hours of operation, and that's all in the packet. Generally speaking, staff feels that this use is very consistent with the neighborhood and not detrimental. It's surrounded by a highway, an open field, and a cemetery, and you really can't get much more isolated yet close to town than this. There are 71 existing parking spaces shown here on this layout. 55 would be required based on today's uses. 71 were required when the site plan was built, not asking them to take any out. The one change to the site, which would not trigger an administrative amendment, is the addition of bike hoops. They're shown on the floor plan drawing down here. It's a concrete pad coming off of that slanted pedestrian path, and right where all those big bushes were in the photo. They're showing too many hoops here. This meets code, but they only need half as many hoops. This is like putting one bike on each hoop instead of one on each side. So we can work with them on that, but what would normally be required here is 5 Class B and 4 Class C. There is a bit of an overhang that partially covers the 5 Class B spaces. If this were a brand-new site, I would not count these as Class B spaces. But I think that they've done a good job fitting them into the site. I want to see if I can show you a picture. See, here's the overhang. So we've probably got 4 feet, 3 feet there, 3 feet there. And that's where the bikes would go right up against the building. Again, I think as a retrofit in an area that's not heavily populated by bikers, I do think that this is acceptable. It may also be possible to put a couple of the hoops against the wall perpendicular so that you can get your bike more under the cover if you're going to leave it there all day, if you're working in the plaza and you don't want it to get wet. We've never received any complaints about odors or any other problems from this business in this site. And all of these special exception uses will be conditioned on the petitioner obtaining a state of Michigan medical marijuana license and a city permit within 3 years, and operating a provisioning center within 3 years. If they get hung up somewhere and don't get those in that time frame, they would have to reapply for the same location and go through this process over again. If the business opens, but then it closes or goes out of business or whatever, the special exception use does stay with the property, and a new business could come in and operate under that special exception use. They would obviously have to adhere to all of the same conditions of the original, but it does stay with the land, not move with the business. The other 2 conditions on here are about the trees and about the 9 bicycle parking spaces being added. I think that's about it. Yep, I think that's about it on this one. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
To preemptively, before you either read the motion or coerce one of your colleagues into doing so, One potential change to the motion that we've provided you is to consider that this, under the conditions, that the first condition be obtaining and maintaining. There will be a requirement for a city permit, and those will be issued on an annual basis. If for some reason that were not to be granted in the future, that having that as a condition potentially would be a condition that would then be failed to be met, and then the special exception use would not be in compliance. Again, that would still run with the property, so another entity could potentially come in and secure that license, but I think we might want to clarify that it's not only the initial obtaining of that license, but on an ongoing basis, they'd be maintaining both permits and licenses from the state and the city.
So you're suggesting that when I do read the motion, after the public hearing, that I insert those two words?
Yes.
I will draw that to your attention when we get to that point. Thank you. All right, but now, before reading the motion, I will open the public hearing, or open for public comment. Individuals may speak for 3 minutes on this item. The first person who is the official representative of an organized group or who is representing the petitioner may speak for 5 minutes, and additional representatives may speak for 3 minutes. Please do state your name and address for the record verbally, and then sign in. So if anyone would like to address the commission about this petition, please approach the podium.
My name is Alec Griffel. I'm the petitioner. I'm going to write my name here very quickly. Good evening. Thanks for having me. Ms. Thatcher brought it to my attention, I believe yesterday, that we have to plant many trees. That's okay. Our name is Tree City after all, so we have no problem with doing such. With regards to the bike rack, apparently it's a little too long and there may not be the proper classes there, and I appreciate the flexibility with regards to that. And I believe that's really all that I have. If there's any questions, feel free to ask. And thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak on this item? Okay, then I'll close the public hearing. I will read the petition, though because of my cold, I may enlist somebody else to read the next one. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission, after hearing all interested persons and reviewing all relevant information, including an accompanying site plan, finds the petition substantially meets the standards in Chapter 55 zoning ordinance, Section 5:104 special exceptions, and Section 5:50.1 regulations concerning medical use of marijuana, and therefore approves the 2730 Jackson special exception use for a medical marijuana provisioning center. This approval is based on the following findings. 1. The proposed use will be consistent with the C2B Business Service District, which provides for commercial activities including retail establishments, offices, and personal services. 2. The proposed use will not adversely impact traffic, circulation, or streets and road intersections based on the location. Jackson Avenue provides access to the site, and the proposed use is consistent with other surrounding uses' traffic impact. 3. There is an existing site plan approved by City Council in 1985 and administratively amended in 1986 on file in Planning Services. 4. Through documentation submitted by the petitioner regarding waste disposal, inventory tracking, security, and other methods of operation of the facility, the provisioning center will be operated in a manner that will not have an adverse impact on the neighboring properties or area and will not have a detrimental impact on natural features. This special exception used approval is based on the following conditions. 1, and this is where it's a little bit different than what's in the packet. The petitioner obtaining and maintaining both a state of Michigan medical marijuana license and a city of Ann Arbor medical marijuana permit, and providing documentation to planning services within 3 years of the City Planning Commission approval date of this petition. 2, the petitioner operating a medical marijuana business at this address within 3 years of the City Planning Commission approval date of this petition. 3, the petitioner planting trees shown on the City Council approved site plan that are missing or in poor health by May 30th, 2018. These trees will be of a caliber and species that match the ones shown on the site plan, or equivalent trees of a more appropriate species as determined by city staff. And 4, the petitioner installing 9 bicycle parking spaces as shown on sheet A101. And that the Ann Arbor Planning Commission approves the attached site plan which demonstrates compliance with the applicable special exception use standards as no physical development of the property is proposed. Do I have a commissioner who wishes to move that? Commissioner Trudeau, seconded by Commissioner Ackerman. Now we have commission discussion. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Thatcher, for all the work on this. This is very thorough, and I think a good way to start this process. It's just I think we've heard a lot about this site, both now 3-4 weeks ago, and again tonight, and I feel fairly comfortable with it. I don't need to dive into too many specifics about the site itself. Just some clarification. Will motions always be structured with first an explanation of how these meet zoning, followed by any conditions that are site-specific, as well as the 2 kind of disclaimer conditions that regarding when they have to be operational and how they have to obtain and maintain licensing and permitting?
Yeah, that's our intent,
Okay.
unless we come up with something better.
No, I think it's
Yeah.
thorough. I was glad to see the pattern across both, and I think that's a consistent and thorough way to structure this. That's really all I have. I think this has been really great.
Commissioner Weatherby.
So I guess my question, the 3 years, within 3 years of the approval date, is that a standard time period? Is that, that seems to me kind of a long time?
Yeah, that's what's in code for special exception uses
Okay.
right now. If they're not activated in 3 years, the word is activated in code, then it ceases to exist. So this is basically covering how you could activate this special exception use.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do think these are easier, the ones that are already in existence and have not caused any problems, so good job. But these are going to be the easier ones for us, I think, than the ones that may come later, but thank you.
Commissioner Gibrandel.
This is a question for staff. So I know last time we met, we were kind of struggling with whether these are site plans or not in terms of how we were handling some of these things. And so I know that we're all kind of trying to narrow down on this and figure it out, but one of the things that I noticed in the photos, which if it were a site plan, we would make them fix that sidewalk, and which was full of cracks. And so I'm just wondering, I'm not saying let's do it, I'm just asking the question because we are setting precedents right now. And so it seems to me that one of the, we put a lot of work in front of us by approving each one of these. One of the opportunities we have with approving each one of these is that we get to have trees put back in that should have been checked 20 years ago, and we get to have bike parking in a way that we don't right now. Do we fix sidewalks? I mean, it's a question of how far we go and what are we really dealing with here in terms of site plan, special exemption use, and what standards we're holding people to. So I guess I just open it up for you, but also for our just general discussion about how we're going to handle these things moving forward.
Sure. Let me first address the larger question. It's a little unconventional in the way that we're incorporating a site plan approval here into this motion as a component to a special exception use, and that's very much by intention. We, in gearing up for this, truthfully, I've been doing a little bit more research on the precipice of a lot of new special exception use, which is a pretty infrequent application for us here at the Planning Commission. I think last year we had like 3. One of the things I've learned actually is that state law really guides us towards a really seamless integration of site plan with special exception use. And that's really logical because when we look at our special exception use standards, they relate to findings of circulation and impact, and those are the things that you as the Planning Commission should be looking at when you are considering those special exception. Component to that, though, we also have an ordinance that says when you have an existing facility and you're not proposing any substantive physical change, no site plan is required. And so we very much are trying to make sure that both the petitioner and us as the city are mindful of the conditions on site as we are making findings based on this use at that location. Sometimes that's going to be documented in the context of a site plan that was previously approved. Sometimes it might be, frankly, a survey of some sort. That's sort of, I guess I'll call it a summary site plan. So that's, I hope that addresses sort of the framework of how that's here. Now then to the second question about how far, I think it's a good question. Because of that provision, like in this case, no physical change is being proposed for that site that would normally invoke site plan. However, similar to going back to that site plan that was previously approved and making sure that it's been realized, I don't think it would be inappropriate to consider adding a condition of sidewalk repair, or frankly, just looking at it, it might be in need of that anyhow, just from our city standards. But because specifically circulation is one of the components of the special exception standards, if you were to consider that to be a bit of a liability to that extent, I don't think it would be inappropriate to incorporate that as a condition. That would be different, I think, than potentially applying stormwater standards, right, or updating the site to current landscape standards, right, where that might not be as directly attributable to one of those special exception use standards. Does that help? Or?
Yeah, no, it does.
Just to add on to that, with everyone that we've met with so far, we've set the baseline as you need to have a good place to keep your trash, and if it's in a dumpster, it needs to be screened, and you must have bike parking and adequate parking. That's a bigger question, which sometimes will trigger site plan, but it's very easy for sidewalk repair or anything else to be added, to sort of the baseline that the Planning Commission is expecting when one of these comes forward.
Thank you. I'd be curious to see what other people think.
Anyone want to chime in? Commissioner Woods?
I would be in support of adding something to this to get those sidewalks in better shape. And then I also had a question about when you read, Chairwoman, the approval, and I thought that there was a short discussion about the fact that a City of Ann Arbor medical marijuana permit is for 1 year. Is that correct? And is that something that should be in this? Because I thought I heard that, I thought I heard you mention it, but then I didn't see it in here. And I wouldn't want someone to not understand that they do need to get an annual permit, so.
Sure. Yeah, that was so there's two, if you are operating a medical marijuana facility in the city of Ann Arbor, there's 2 ordinances that you need to comply with. One is the zoning ordinance. That is where it can happen from a land use perspective and sort of a physical, locational perspective. The second is an ordinance that just authorizes the facilities to occur within the city. Those permits are issued through the clerk's office. They will be issued on an annual basis. That the clerk's office will perform some review of that. It might be background checks. It might be other components. So that was very much the intention of me suggesting the addition of and maintaining. I don't want to to be clear, just by not including that doesn't mean they still don't have to comply with that ordinance. They would still have to do that to be in compliance with city laws. I just think that, I don't think it hurts to add that clarification here, tying it to the land use as well.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, Commissioner Briggs.
I can't even believe I'm about to say this, but I'm struggling specifically on this project with, I love bicycling and walking connectivity, but this site is horribly inaccessible on both counts, which is really the fault of government. And so I'm struggling with the level of maybe investment that we're asking on this site when it is incredibly dangerous for people to utilize that, cross the street. There's not even accessible to cross the street. So I'm not even seeing like the class, 9 bicycle spaces here. And, I see the need for a few, and I actually wonder if maybe both of them should be appropriately covered for people who might be working there, because I'm not sure that the overhang really would be appropriate. I'd rather see 2 properly covered bicycle spaces for people who work there. Anyway, it's kind of a big discussion around this, but I don't know. I'm just throwing out my thoughts on that.
Does that spur discussion for anyone? Yes, Commissioner Trudeau.
The thing I'm wrestling with is like, do we want to set a baseline precedent where we say wherever there's a sidewalk, it should be in good shape, but then looking at the site, the sidewalk, it's a sidewalk to nowhere. Nobody's should be or will be likely to be using that. So asking for that investment seems like a lot. However, eventually the adjacent parcel will be developed, and at that point the sidewalk will become relevant. And so I'd like to see it at that point come up to shape. And I don't know how far into the weeds we want to get on the requirement, but there, because that seems like impossible to track. So I'm wrestling with that a little bit too, specifically for this location, because it really is stranded in terms of pedestrian access.
Anyone else? Yes, Commissioner Gibb-Randall.
Yeah, I think it's terrible now. I'm thinking of the future. And a sidewalk will, one that's poured right and uses the right mix, and, that should be there for 50 years. And I'm hopeful that a future hotel will go in there. And the only way these sidewalks ever get built is if one piece at a time happens. And so that's how I feel about it, is that it's doing nothing now. And it would be dangerous for somebody to hop over that, guardrail on the other side. But it's more of setting a precedent and also having some faith in the future is sort of how I see it. And I think about the bike parking too. I do see people biking along there. Is it safe? Not really, but people do it. And I do think that even the statement of having those hoops there is important too, because it just makes people think about it. And I think that we do need to kind of jog people's minds in that way. So I agree that it seems kind of pointless right now, but it also feels like there's some important precedent setting around that, and that we hope that it will become both those things in the future.
Yes, Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you. So I appreciate the conversation around setting precedent, and I think it's an important one. I think I lean away from mandating improvements in the right-of-way for something that's essentially keeping the same use but adding a special exemption. Just if this helps the conversation at all, the sidewalk does exist within the public right-of-way, and the sidewalk millage covers repairs to the sidewalks for any sidewalk in a right-of-way adjacent to a property on the tax roll. which this is. And this area of town will be covered in 2019. So, not this next construction season, but the construction season after. And be paid for with tax dollars, but they are taxpayers as well.
Thank you. That answered actually one of my questions, which is how do we fund sidewalk repairs? So that's great. Any other commissioner comments? Yes, Commissioner Woods.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to add, well, I'm glad to know it's going to be paid for then, by all of us. But I also think that it's important when you have a facility like this that the surrounding area looks well-kept and that it's in good condition, because there are a lot of folks out there who are going to get the wrong idea about this particular facility. And the last thing you want to do is to have a place that looks raggedy or doesn't look well-kept. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us, because many of us will be traveling that area, to have it look as well-kept and maintained as possible. So I'm glad to know from Commissioner Ackerman that perhaps there'll be some funding for that, but I would never think that it's appropriate to not have high standards, particularly because if for nothing else, the folks who are going to be going in and out of this facility deserve to not have to walk or to look at places that don't look as well kept. So that would be my comment on that.
So there was sort of a idea floated. Does anyone want to make propose an amendment or put a motion to propose the amendment to add sidewalk repair?
I guess I would. I'm not quite sure how to word it. I don't have it right in front of me.
Maybe you wanted to say something like,
Thank you, Brett.
condition
Save me.
number 5, the petitioner will repair or replace sidewalks on the site, the public sidewalks adjacent to the site to meet current city standards.
Yeah.
So that would be, I guess, just to be clear, I would envision that would be some assessment of the quality of those, not necessarily a wholesale
Right.
replacement, but if there's some with significant deflection, it would
Right.
require those flags to be replaced.
And again, as part of like a normal petitioner site plan, they would replace these sidewalks. That would be a normal part of site plan submission. If you own this building and you were tearing it down and putting up something new, the city would, even though it's in the right of way, the city would ask you to replace that sidewalk. So that is a standard thing too. So keep that in mind.
So the motion to amend was made by Commissioner Gibrandel. Is there anyone who would like to second that? Seconded by Commissioner Woods. Is there discussion on the proposed amendment to the motion? Yes, Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you. I don't think it's an unreasonable motion. It's not a motion that I'll be supporting. I appreciate that, when we take a look at site plans, yes, a consideration is for the state of the right-of-way is taken into account. I think when you're taking a commercial property that's going to maintain its uses currently, while we are technically reviewing a site plan, the change in use is tame, if non-existent. And to me, a closer analogy would be, let's take a single-family home that's adding an accessory dwelling unit to the rear of its property. It's pretty comparable change of use, but we don't look to that single-family homeowner to replace the sidewalks in front of their home, even if, or ahead of when tax dollars will be used to pay for that replacement in a matter of a year and a half. So I don't think it's an unreasonable request. I just won't be supporting it for that reason.
Other discussion? Commissioner Weatherby.
I think in that, which it actually made me think of this in a slightly different way, which is I don't make money from my single-family home, and I think in a commercial building I think in a commercial building that does change it somewhat for me. that I think if this is a normal part of a site plan and this is a normal thing that we would be asking, you know, replacing a couple of these, if you're already going to pour the concrete for a bike pad, isn't going to be a huge, and I know it's not my money, so sorry. But I think it's not an unreasonable request and a good precedent setting for if we're going to kind of gradually improve some of these areas, and it's something that we would normally include. I think it's a reasonable idea.
Commissioner Briggs?
I don't know if I'm just having an off night, but I don't think I'm going to support this, and I'm only because I recognize that there are going to be improvements that can be made in a relatively short period of time and I don't see connectivity happening before that time frame. And the condition that I'm seeing right now is not so abhorrent that it feels like it needs to be fixed. I mean, I think the precedent component is really important, but I'm also just pragmatic in the sense that this is not, I also don't like pouring concrete for no reason necessarily. But I really appreciate that others are bringing this forward. So, I'm sorry.
Yes, Commissioner Trudeau?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've been weighing is like when we have new construction and a new site plan where you're ripping up the parking lot and putting in new buildings, like putting in a sidewalk is no big deal. You're spending lots and lots and lots of money to do a lot of that work, and you already have the equipment there. Granted, we are getting a little bit of concrete work already, so that sort of tilts me back the other way. But I don't know. I'm trying to imagine like other possible sites where the use is changing, and there might be big upgrades that just would seem, to Commissioner Ackerman's point, like a little bit beyond the scope of what we're really talking about in terms of the changes that are really happening here. The change of use is pretty much how it's been going. And we're getting trees, we're getting some other improvements. So I don't think I'm going to support it, but I definitely agree that it's reasonable, and I am on the fence on it.
Anyone else? Yes, Commissioner Woods?
Well, I wish we had one of our staff here that was specializing perhaps in sidewalks. I don't know. Perhaps I'll ask you, but just looking at the picture that's on the screen right now, and I don't know if the audience is looking at what we're looking at or not, where the sidewalk ends, top westbound, right eastbound. But looking at the sidewalk that is heading off to the west, I mean, that looks like it could be hazardous for people who are walking or jogging along there. I mean, so, maybe I'm having an off night too, but I'm kind of surprised that it doesn't bother us, because if this is an opportunity to fix something like that, then, why aren't we saying fix it? And if I can understand Councilmember Ackerman's, are you saying that within a year this sidewalk's going to get fixed anyway? And so you're saying that we'll just leave it like this for a year because it'll get fixed? And can you guarantee that it's on the list to get fixed?
Is that a direct question?
Yes, if it's all right with the chair for me to ask a direct question.
I'm okay with it.
So I can say that it is in the right-of-way. I can say it's adjacent to a property on the tax roll, and I can say that the district in which it sits is up for sidewalk repairs in 2019. But I think I would hope that the way my comments are being interpreted is a bit more nuanced than that. That it will be, it's more than, it'll happen someday, so it's okay it's not happening today.
I don't know if it was a static or what, but that didn't quite make sense. What do you mean?
So my point is not that, hey, it's going to happen someday, so we don't have to worry about it today. My point is, that this property is on the tax rolls. They're going to be putting a significant amount of money into the sidewalks millage, way more than will, fix these feet of sidewalk. It'll go to benefit the community in a much broader way, sooner than 2019. So the fact that it's going to be fixed, the fact that they're contributing to the millage that is going to fix it and fix many other pieces of sidewalk, it just feels like a double tax. And I don't think that's unreasonable. I'm not vehemently against the idea of assessing them right now to build it. It just does feel like an extra assessment for something that we wouldn't always do for very similar situations.
Okay, I'm saying okay, not because I agree with you, but.
That's okay. Sometimes we won't agree.
I know we won't agree. And in this case, I still think I'd like to see that sidewalk get fixed. Maybe it's because I'm in that ward and go by there all the time, but, and I'm certainly not trying to double tax anybody either. But again, I go back to what I say, there's that whole broken window syndrome. If things are fixed and they look in good shape, then you're much more likely for the residents and the city to be in favor of the area. But once you start neglecting things or letting it just kind of, sort of shake your head at it and say, ooh, look at that sidewalk. You could be on a path that perhaps we as a city don't really want to go. So that's my comment on that.
As Commissioner Klein usually is always the last to speak, I guess that falls to me today. And it's been helpful. I think all of this has been helpful. I actually have a question for staff because I have been by this site many, many times, but I haven't gotten out and looked around. And this is important for kind of how I go on this. I overall agree that we want our infrastructure to be in good shape. If I don't get to choose what happens to sidewalk repair in 2019, but if I were the city, this is not something I would prioritize right now because it's a sidewalk to nowhere. And so my guess is that if there are more needs in this area, this is not going to be one of the highest ones on the priority list then, just because it is a sidewalk to nowhere. But someday it will connect something. What I'm curious about right now is if there is a cow path leading to it on either end. Like, if there's evidence that people are actually using it.
Yeah, there is. And if you look at this aerial, well, it's on the south side of Jackson Avenue down here, the sidewalk is continuous. It keeps going all the way up into the neighborhood, and you can get under I-94 on it, which is why most people walk on that side. You can actually get someplace. Up here, when you're walking past this site, it's only the boundaries of the site. It's only the extent of the site. You can see where the sidewalk ends right here. There is a cow path there. There's a bunch of bushes. It's not a safe place at all to try to get under the highway because you're climbing over things and through things, so the south side is a much better choice. Up here on the other end of the site, it ends right here at the corner of the property. Michigan Inn didn't have any sidewalks. The auto repair place on the corner doesn't. And then there's a very tough place with very poor visibility that the city has not figured out how to get people across yet. And then the sidewalk picks up again in front of the Hampton Inn and the Clarion.
Thank you. And that, unfortunately, makes it even harder. Because the other thing that I'm weighing is if it's a sidewalk to nowhere that we've now improved to make it look like, oh, this is an okay sidewalk to use. I don't know. This is a really hard one. And I totally agree with the precedent-setting idea of this because generally speaking, we are a community that values good, non-motorized transportation options. And we want the people that come before us to uphold those values. And when we have opportunities to see improvements in those, rightfully so, we like to hold petitioners to that. I personally am really torn, and I hope that I can delay voting on this for just a minute because I don't know how I'm going to vote, honestly.
No.
Yes, Commissioner Briggs.
Controversial.
It's okay, I just flipped, so, with the cow path. So don't stress too much. So, anyway.
All right, well, that bought me a minute. Is there any other discussion on, right now what we're voting on is whether or not to add this amendment, a proposed fifth condition to the proposal. Any more discussion on that? Okay, so I guess we should call, and if everyone in favor of the amendment to add this condition, please raise your right hand and say yes. Yes.
Yes.
That is 5 in favor. Do you need to know who that is? That's Gibrandal, Briggs, Mills, Woods, Weatherby. And 2 opposed. Raise your right hand and say yes.
No, I think we say no.
Raise your right hand and say no.
No.
Ackerman and Trudeau. And that does not get to the 6 quorum that we need.
Yes, per the Planning Commission bylaws, you require 6 votes to act on plans or the granting of special exception uses. That would be what we would call a technical failure.
Okay, so that's a technical failure of adding the amendment to the motion. So now we go back to the motion as I originally read, which is as printed except with the 2 little words in the first condition. Is there additional discussion on the motion as read? Is that the appropriate thing to do here? Any additional discussion on that? Okay. All in favor of the motion, as I read earlier, please raise your right hand and say yes.
Yes.
And that is unanimous with those that are here. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, we are to item 2B, or item 9B, sorry. This is the Arbor Wellness Special Exception Use Permit and Site Plan for City Planning Commission approval. And I think Ms. Thatcher has something, will have the staff report for us.
Yes. All right. Back to 321 East Liberty. This one has fewer conditions attached to it. There are no additional site improvements or repairs associated with this. Just the standards the petitioner must obtain and maintain, you might want to add, the state of Michigan medical marijuana license and the city permit, and that they'll be operating within 3 years. The rest of the language is very similar to the last one. So here's the site in the middle of the East Liberty Street between South Fifth Avenue and South Division. You can see from the aerial that the footprint is about a half the length of the site. Parking in the back is a gravel parking lot. The spaces are not formal. They're shown on the survey with lines, but they're not really there because it's a gravel parking lot. There is some landscaping up in the front, and on the east side of the building here, this is a covered ramp for entrance from the front and the rear into the building. It is a shared driveway between the building to the west and this one, and it's pretty much split right down the middle. Site survey, again, this is just, these lines are here to demonstrate how many cars could fit here. This is in the special parking district. It's in the downtown zoning district, so no parking is required. For that reason, this gravel parking lot is not required to be brought up to current standards for a parking lot, which would mean paving the driveway and the spaces and striping them and probably triggering some stormwater and some other site plan requirements. View of the building on this block. It's an interesting block because it has these 2-story historic buildings on both sides of the street. The historic district, this section of it ends with this house to the right of the one we're talking about right now. Here's the back. Here's the gravel parking lot in the back. Here's the entrance from the rear to the ADA accessible ramp into the building. and it also goes to the front sidewalk. One more shot. It's kind of hard to see here, but there's already a bike hoop in place here. And some bollards to protect things from vehicles. This business has been in place here for 6 years. It's certainly compatible with the block and the businesses that are on it. Again, no complaints have been received about this business. It's a very low-key presence. They don't have flashy signage. They've gone to the Historic District Commission to get approvals every time that it's needed. For the bicycle parking, 1 Class C bike space is required, and 4 are provided in the existing bike rack. The site is served by the downtown sidewalk system. The vehicle trips generated are consistent with the general retail uses found in the downtown, and all of the required statements were provided and covered in the attachments to the petition. And I really don't have much more to say about this. I think I mentioned last time that it's a very well-maintained site. It's a very nice presence in the middle of this block, and we do appreciate that they've been maintaining the building specifically for this business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thatcher. All right, now we will go to the public hearing. I'll open that. Again, individuals may speak for up to 3 minutes. Would anyone like to speak on this item?
Good evening. I just have a couple handouts here for you. These are just sort of casual visual aid here. Good evening. My name is Jonah Copy, and I live at 225 Briarcrest Drive here in Ann Arbor in the 4th Ward. Greatly appreciate all your time and consideration on this project and all the other special exception use hearings, all the ordinance work regarding medical marijuana here in Ann Arbor. And just wanted to give a little quick background there. That's one of the first improvements that was made there. It's to the ramp on the side of the building, which Ms. Thatcher has referenced. And so there's a picture there from 2010 from when I actually took over the management of this property. And then there's a more recent photo in the past couple of years showing the ramp, landscaping, some of the other improvements that have been made there. Yeah, just wanted to show that. I am the property manager for the building. That has been in my family since 1978. I currently manage the property for my uncle, and we just do everything we can in terms of being a good neighbor downtown, have an excellent, strong working relationship with the Ann Arbor Police Department, and just I'm really happy to be here and to be a business in downtown Ann Arbor. Very happy to answer any questions that you might have. And one thing that comes up when folks often ask about medical marijuana or the industry overall, they ask what are the biggest challenges or things like that. And interestingly enough, I think they're pretty similar to the challenges that all businesses in downtown Ann Arbor face, and that is parking. And so one thing that we've done over the years is actually lease parking places from our neighbor, Vahan's Tailoring and Clothing, so that we have actually additional to what is available at our location. So it might not be official or reflected in the report, but definitely do as much as we can to provide parking and have a great impact on downtown. So I appreciate your consideration. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to the commission on this item? Okay, then I'll close the public hearing. Does anybody really want to read this? Otherwise, I can read it. I will read it. The motion reads as follows. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission, after hearing all interested persons and reviewing all relevant information, including an accompanying site plan, finds the petition substantially meets the standards in Chapter 55 zoning ordinance, Section 5:104 special exceptions, and Section 5:50.1 regulations concerning medical use of marijuana, and therefore approves the 321 East Liberty special exception use for a medical marijuana provisioning center. This approval is based on the following findings. 1, the proposed use will be consistent with the D1 downtown core zoning district, which encourages a diversity of uses designed to be accessed by a variety of modes of transportation. 2, the proposed use will not adversely impact traffic, circulation, or streets and road intersections based on the downtown location, proximity to transit service, and adequate pedestrian facility access. 3, through documentation submitted by the petitioner regarding waste disposal, inventory tracking, security, and other methods of operation of the facility, the provisioning center will be operated in a manner that will not have an adverse impact to the neighboring properties, area, and will not have a detrimental impact on natural features. 4, the building it occupies, the building occupies, sorry, I'm gonna amend it on the fly. The building occupies an FAR of 64% and some limited open space, though none is required, in compliance with requirements of the D1 zoning district. This special exception use approval is based on the following conditions, and this one I've amended to. 1, the petitioner must obtain, the petitioner obtaining and maintaining, so that's two small edits from what's written. The petitioner obtaining and maintaining both a state of Michigan medical marijuana license and a City of Ann Arbor medical marijuana permit, and provide documentation to planning services within 3 years of the City Planning Commission approval date of this petition. 2, the petitioner operating a medical marijuana business at this address was within 3 years of the City Planning Commission approval date of this petition. And that the Ann Arbor Planning Commission approves the attached site plan, which demonstrates compliance with the applicable special exception use standards, as no physical development of the property is proposed. Do I have someone that would like to move that? Moved by Commissioner Weatherby, seconded by Commissioner Ackerman. Commission discussion of this item. Commissioner Ackerman.
I actually don't have anything on this item. I will, after this, want to raise a point of order about the last vote. After this, regarding what counts as an affirmative vote to act on something with respect to the amendment. I just reviewed the bylaws, so nothing on this one. Happy to approve it. I think we've been through a lot of it.
Commissioner Weatherby.
This is one where I've noticed, I walk by here a lot, and I've noticed that it has really looked very, very nice in the last few years, and I really appreciate it. It's a very distinctive and unusual building in downtown, and you know, it was a fairly obvious, like, wow, who's in there now? Because it looks really great. And so I just really appreciate that, and you know, it's very distinctive. It actually, I think, has enhanced downtown in that area, which can look a little raggedy at times, and this has really, I think it's really been a good addition, so thank you.
Other commissioners, Commissioner Gibb Randall.
I agree. So we appreciate people taking care of properties like that. And my question is a little bit procedural in that I noticed when I was walking down there about a few weeks ago that there's another one called the Green Door that's not that far away. And is it just because they haven't applied yet? Like because you're the second one in and you're too close, that they are the ones that lose out? Is that kind of how it's going to, the cookie crumbles with this sort of thing?
The existing businesses were given a head start and allowed to apply before everybody else when the application, when the ordinance went into effect on February 12th. The Green Door did not come in before February 12th. So they were effectively shut out by this business. Had they both come in, we would have figured out how to deal with it. But since they didn't, they can no longer apply for that site.
That's what I was wondering. So basically, it's really who can get their ducks in order the fastest to be the first one. So therefore, you then determine what the distance is between yourself and the next one, just for our own sense going forward. You know, that's going to make a big difference for who gets approved and not, basically. So who can get it together the fastest and get approved the fastest.
If any of you look online at the medical marijuana information page, which I'll be beefing up for the public, not just for applicants. There is a map on there that shows businesses that have applied their 600-foot radius and buffers around schools of 1,000 feet. And it's very interesting, and the zoning districts where provisioning centers are allowed. And it's very interesting to see, spaces filling up and other spaces not filling up,
Right, yeah.
in respect to each other.
Other comments? Yes, Commissioner Woods.
I just have a question either for the petitioner or for staff regarding the gravel parking lot. Because I think one of the pictures sort of showed like a depression. Yep, I think. So how, what are the standards for that in terms of like, with the bad weather, creating potholes or what have you? Maybe it's not called a pothole in a gravel lot, but at any rate, I'm just curious about how, are there any standards about maintaining that?
I'm not aware of any in an exempt parking lot like this. This is not required parking. If it were required parking, it wouldn't look like this anyway. So it's really up to the property owner to maintain it. Obviously, if they didn't maintain it, they would probably impact their client base negatively. I want to point out that this was taken this morning after all of yesterday's rain, and there was very little standing water on the site. I think that they have it graded appropriately or are doing something to address what's going on back there, because I was wading through puddles in other areas of downtown, but not here.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments, questions? The question that I had was not so much about this site. I think from the comments last time, it's well maintained, they're meeting all those standards, but it was more about the spacing. And so knowing, I didn't see that within the staff report in terms of how close it is to the nearest school or to the nearest provisioning center, because it's the first one. But knowing that there's a map, I wonder if that might just be attached in the future.
Yeah, we could do that. That would be great. And I already wrote down, the very first thing I wrote down when I sat down here tonight was add the 600 and the 1,000-foot thing. It's always going to have to say it is more than 600 feet from a provisioning center and more than 1,000 feet from a school, but there's no reason that it should be in the staff report. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And the map would be very interesting because going forward, we're going to have some businesses that feel much closer than these two.
And so showing those circles, I think, will just be really helpful for us. So thank you. All right, if there's no other comments, I think we can vote. All in favor, please raise your right hand and say yes.
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 Yes, that is everyone. Thank you. Now, we had an order of business that you wanted to go back to, Commissioner Ackerman.
Sorry, I'm actually going to rescind my point of order. So if that amendment to the Jackson Road motion technically failed, I don't know if Commissioner Trudeau and I technically won, but I wanted to be fair, so I went back into the bylaws just to make sure that it does require 6 votes. I was confused when I raised the point of order. At first, in our bylaws in Section 10 of Article 7, it states that the commission only needs 5 affirmative votes to act, but then later clarifies for votes regarding plans, policy statements, or granting of special exemption uses, recommendations to council, and petitions, it requires 6 votes. So that's why I raised the point of order. But nice exercise in reviewing our bylaws. I wanted to be fair, but glad we reviewed it.
Thank you. And that you were being fair when you were on the winning side.
Yeah, the quote-unquote winning.
That's an honest politician for you. There you go. All right.
Commissioner Ackerman, I thought you were going to change your vote. That would really be fair.
Still hard-headed.
All right, so we have finished our unfinished business, which is great, and now we are moving on to our regular business. We have one item tonight, and that is 2900 Huron Parkway landscape modification for City Planning Commission approval. Again, this will proceed the same way with a staff report, then public hearing, and then commission discussion.
This site is on Huron Parkway, past the intersection of Nixon, close to Traverwood. For reference, You're looking here, this is the new Ann Arbor District Library, the Traver Library. And this site is between the Kroger, which is here, and the Traver branch of the library. The site currently has a couple of different buildings. There are two large sort of L-shaped buildings here. I'm going to switch to this for a second because it's a lot clearer. One-story office research type buildings. And the proposal here that is up for an administrative amendment to this site plan is to connect the building with a small connector on the front here and another one on the back, and then to create effectively an interior courtyard. So all of this parking would go away. And here you can see the two buildings, one on the left, one on the right, and these are the two connectors on the front and the back, and this is the new courtyard area. And it may be easier to look at your paper copies on this, but all these little hashed areas are existing or proposed bioretention areas in the parking lot. And this petition is requesting for a modification from Chapter 62, the landscaping and screening, that requires new landscape islands and bioswales in existing parking lots. The petitioner stated that because there are no changes proposed in the remaining parking areas, and that there's not sufficient space in these areas immediately adjacent to the parking lot to install bioretention areas without regrading and removing existing interior landscaping island trees. And you can see where those trees are already existing around the site. So the Planning Commission has the authority to approve this modification if it's consistent with the intent of the ordinance. And the specific section that they're requesting relief from is when the total area required in interior landscape islands for all vehicular use areas exceeds 750 square feet, at least 50% of the area in the required interior landscape area must be depressed bioretention areas and utilized for stormwater management. Planning staff, forestry staff, and stormwater staff all support this request. And like I said, this is an administrative amendment to the site plan to put these two small additions to connect the buildings, but that can't move forward until the Planning Commission grants a landscape modification for the parking area.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Thatcher. All right, we can open this for public comment, for the public hearing. Again, individuals may speak for 3 minutes, except the first person who is the representative of an organized group or the petitioner. And please do state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. I'm Emily McKinnon with Smith Group JGR. I'm a resident of Ann Arbor at 809 Daniel Street. Thanks for that, Jill. Just a minor clarification. You said that they were all existing bioretention islands, and they're not. I think you just misspoke there. So a good explanation there of what the project entails. Small building addition to connect the two buildings, create an interior courtyard amenity for the building occupants to use. The project results in a net decrease in impervious coverage on the site from the reduction of parking spaces. We're reducing the parking to the minimum required by the ordinance. So with that addition of the green space, we are effectively reducing stormwater runoff, the quantity of stormwater runoff from the project. So we think we're meeting the intent of the ordinance to add bioretention to improve environmental sustainability within the projects. You can see on the site there, it was built 20 years ago with a single bay of parking surrounding the project. And as indicated in the petition, in order to incorporate bioretention islands, we'd essentially have to regrade the entire parking lot area to get everything to drain to larger bioretention areas and essentially removing all the existing interior landscape trees. So the request was to waive the requirement for adding bioretention since we're reducing impervious coverage on the site and therefore reducing the stormwater runoff from the site. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a comment on this proposal? No. We'll come back to the overall comments once we get through this item. Anything else on this proposal? All right, I will close the public hearing. and read the motion, which is short. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby approves the proposed landscape modifications according to Chapter 62 Landscape and Screening Ordinance, Section 5:6021G. Do I have a commissioner who would like to move this? Moved by Commissioner Wood, seconded by Commissioner Ackerman. Commission discussion. Commissioner Gebrandel.
This is directed towards the petitioner, so if you could come back up. So I totally appreciate, you can't just regrade the entire parking lot and make the island suddenly lower than everything else. I totally get that. I just wonder if you explored the possibility of, you have a lot of roof there, and you probably could have taken some of that water and made some very nice bioretention areas from impervious surface that you now take somewhere else into that area. Did you explore anything, or is that just going to be a bunch of lawn?
I'm confused. Are you referring to the
new
courtyard space? Yeah, so I mean, that all it's identified just as green space. The details of, how that is restored with plantings or anything is still to be determined. It certainly could be something that is incorporated in there. It wouldn't be of the size that meets the ordinance requirement, and it's not an interior island, so.
I'm not saying it would be the same thing. It's more like it would be a demonstration of we still, believe this is important. Now, the reality is that roof is probably going somewhere else to an approved detention area, but it might be nice to signal either through the sidewalk or the new roofs that are going in, perhaps, to be able to take the roof runoff from that and have some shallow bioretention areas in the courtyard itself made into gardens that then could be. That seems like that would be kind of, we're not doing the parking lot, but it's showing we care about these things too. So that's my comment in terms of the new, even though you have a net loss, it would be a way to demonstrate the commitment to how we deal with stormwater in this area. So something to consider. Not required, but something to consider.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Yes, Commissioner Weatherby.
I just have a comment. I can definitely see why you do this. I work in a office that's 2 separate buildings, and just for safety, not having people running across the parking lot all the time is helpful. I think it's just interesting for the Planning Commission that this is a group who is, willingly reducing parking. And I think this may be kind of the start of what we see, where these big buildings with lots of parking, that is no longer what people are looking for. And I just thought that was kind of an interesting, that it's going for green space and office space and removing the parking. It was just something that I noticed in this one, that this is sort of very much of a suburban office park setting, and it's interesting that we're reducing the parking now. So that was just a comment, but I can definitely see why you'd want to do this in this area.
Thank you. And that was what I was going to say. So, yes, it's great to see that people are not overbuilding the parking. And this is perhaps a part of town where you wouldn't necessarily, where you don't see tons of that. And so I think that that's great. Any other comments? All right. Then we can vote on this. All in favor of the motion as read, please raise your right hand and say yes.
Yes.
Yes, that is everyone. Now there is an opportunity for audience participation. Anyone may, members of the audience may speak for 3 minutes on any item.
Okay. Alec Riffle again. I, too, had a lot of trouble with the sidewalk issue. I, myself, went into a very in-depth analysis with regards to the sidewalks. Number one, it's really dangerous getting to those sidewalks. People actually don't use them. They cross from Bethlehem Cemetery into our driveway, and that's kind of how they get across, which is super dangerous. So I was thinking in my head, I was like, okay, if we repair these sidewalks, are we encouraging more alternative uses of transportation, which I'm all about, but safe alternative uses of transportation. Another thing to keep in mind is we don't own the property. We just lease it. So our actual suite is the furthest away from that sidewalk. It looks like it belongs to the gym that's actually out front. So to be honest, I never even knew that they were cracked until I saw those pictures, because nobody uses them and nobody's ever reported them. But you brought it up, and it does look like a tripping hazard. And despite us not owning the property, we'd be willing to fix the tripping hazards at least, even though nobody really uses it. I think it's still kind of our responsibility because we brought it upon the property. It's not really the landlord's responsibility. And, oh yeah, one more point to consider. Most of these petitioners, they don't own their properties. So if there are many site improvements to be had, they're the ones who are actually putting them on their back and paying for them on the behalf of the property owner. So something to kind of consider. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anyone else want to address the commission? All right, that ends.
I was just, the last commenter brought up an interesting point for me, and it may be something that perhaps I don't know if we've ever discussed it, but when we talk about a special exception use going with the property, and if that use is going with the property, but it's owned by someone else, then it sounds kind of complicated.
Yeah, it is, and you'll note that in the application materials, that's why we require permission from the property owner to make sure that any tenant can represent the application for that use at that property, so that property owner is fully aware and supportive of that.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
All right. Is there any commission proposed business? Okay, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Commissioner Gabrandel, seconded by Commissioner Trudeau. All in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes, that is everyone. We are adjourned.